getting started with today's agenda. We'll just briefly have introductions. Again, my name is Derek Longmire, Director of the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio. Stacy, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
This is Stacy Fronapple-Hassan, Bureau Chief for Problem Gambling Services at the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services.
And Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Yee. I'm from Recovery Resources. I was previously an intern with Mike and Ashley, but I'm on board now.
Fantastic. Thank you, ladies. We'll talk about the history of Problem Gambling Awareness Month, review some of the national resources that are available, talk about some Ohio resources and activities that will be going on at both the state level, the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio level, and the local level, as well as some local implementation that's going on, and then have some questions and wrap up. So a little bit of history about Problem Gambling Awareness Month. It is coordinated by NCPG, the National Council for Problem Gambling, and this is the 14th year that we've had the Problem Gambling Awareness Month. It coincides with March Madness, and we know that that is a time where gambling is quite prevalent. And right now for 2018, we kind of have what's being called as the gambling trifecta. We always have the Super Bowl, which is a big gambling day, and March Madness, which is a big gambling period, but we also have squeezed in between those two, the Olympics. So that is an opportunity to have kind of a different audience of gamblers than we typically have. So something that we should also be thinking of. One of the most important pieces about Problem Gambling Awareness Month is that it is a grassroots campaign. A lot of resources are provided at the national and state levels, but just with the availability and ability to reach to the local level, it really does require some grassroots implementation. So having that an important piece, and hopefully all the resources will be available to you in as easy to use ways as possible. And if you have questions related to those resources, feel free to reach out to me here at PGNO, or you can reach out to NCPG for some of the national resources as well. As we look to the goals for PGAM, Problem Gambling Awareness Month, we just call PGAM, there are two goals. One is to increase public awareness of problem gambling and the availability of prevention, treatment, and recovery services. So really looking at making sure that communities are more aware of not only the impact of problem gambling, but also the resources that are available to those that are impacted by problem gambling. And those resources would be for those impacted, either the individual themselves or for loved ones, being family or friends or other folks that may be impacted. So really want to look at that, as well as encourage healthcare providers to screen clients for problem gambling. And there's National Screening Day that will kind of help with that. And I am not a treatment practitioner, so I can only speak a little bit about what my understanding of a screening, but really wanting to make sure that screening is done in a way that's timely and appropriate to the individual, not necessarily right at intake. And we'll have additional webinars focused on kind of screening methods and things that some other providers have done that can speak into much greater detail and have much greater knowledge than I do. The 2018 theme for Problem Gambling Awareness Month is Have the Conversation. This is a theme that has carried over for the last several years and is really a great opportunity to have those conversations with everyone. When you're at the barber to get your hair cut, to when you're at the grocery store with the checkout, there's always those opportunities to really have that conversation. And the blurb here is just a little bit from NCPG's website about what that might look like. And you can see that on the right-hand side, we have the Problem Gambling Awareness Month logo that really promotes having that conversation. And we know that gambling is one of those silent diseases, and without having that conversation, it remains silent. So really focusing on this time of year to have those conversations and really begin building that outreach that's going on. NCPG has several resources that are available to you that we'll quickly review. The first is the 2018 Problem Gambling Awareness Month Toolkit Guide, and that's a PDF that's 20-some pages that go into great detail about how you can implement PGAM locally. There's also problem gambling FAQ. We hear a lot of questions about gambling, and if it's not a substance, can it really be a disease? And the FAQs really talk about that. There's also a proclamation how-to. Stacey will talk about the statewide proclamation that will be requested, but you can also do local proclamations to your mayors or city council members, and there's great guides there. 31 days of tweets, something that we will be implementing here at PG&O, and Stacey will be talking about that as well. Also, we know that having print-ready artwork is often a challenge, so NCPG has those resources available to you kind of at all levels. So regardless of your digital expertise, they have something that will work with the programs that you use. And then finally, a local press release template to really kind of help lay out the overall focus of not only PGAM and have the conversation, but also some data that can kind of help support really the need for having the conversation and continuing to build that community awareness about the campaign. So with that, we'll pop on over to some of the resources that are available with the guide. And I'll pull up my Finder. So the first one is the Problem Gambling Awareness Month Toolkit. And you can see that it's multi-page toolkit here, really talking about the various themes throughout the week. And we know that when we're talking about Problem Gambling Awareness Month, we can't have the same message or talking points for every audience. So you can see through the weekly themes that it's broken down into 5 weeks. So we are looking at week 1 with just a general audience. Week 1 is also looking with healthcare providers and with the gaming industry. We'll talk more about opportunities to connect with the gaming industry a little bit later. As we look to week 2, again, we're going to continue with those 3 pieces with the general audience, the healthcare providers, and the gaming industry. And those will carry out through all 5 weeks. So you can have consistent messaging for those audiences throughout the month of March. And again, this is just an opportunity to continue that engagement and connectivity. It will talk a little bit about the hashtag Have the Conversation. So when you're using your social media posts, make sure that you're using that hashtag. It not only helps draw together the audiences, but also shows the National Council that you're participating in the movement for March, and can really help make those connections with other folks that are interested in learning more about the campaign. The weekly themes are broken down by tasks, so you can follow through there. And each piece has both a message and an action point. We want to make sure that we have clear, consistent messaging with the audience that we're trying to reach, and we also want to make sure that there's an action point associated with it. So those are clearly outlined through all 5 weeks of the campaign, and those resources are available at ncpggambling.org. So it's actually ncpgambling.org, and that link will be provided as well on Thursday when those sources go out. It also talks about National Gambling Screening Day. So that is going to be on Tuesday, March 13th. Talks about why it's important to screen for a gambling disorder, who should be doing that, and what would happen if you identify someone that has screened as though they might have a gambling disorder, some kind of next steps with that. So again, those resources are all available on the National Council for Problem Gambling's website. Also made mention to the FAQs, and this is a simple one-pager that really talks about the resources that are available, or really talks about some of those frequently asked questions and ways that you can respond to that. So some broad questions, just what is gambling, kind of helping with that, and then really looking to combat some of those myths about what problem gambling might look like. So isn't problem gambling just a financial problem, and really kind of helping with that. And how much money do you have to lose before you have the gambling becomes a problem? So really ways to kind of combat that. That's going to be helpful when you work with your community members, and also if you're looking to put out a press release, hopefully you'll get some media feedback with that. And these are some nice, easy bullet points that you can have at your desk or at the table when you're being interviewed, so you can really easily kind of reference back to that so we can have those clear and again, consistent messages, which are important as we work through the month. And that way, what we're saying in Columbus is consistent with what we're hearing in Cincinnati and all over the state. And again, we want to make sure things are as easy as possible to everyone as possible. So this is a sample proclamation that is available. So this is just kind of general tips for that proclamation. And then this is what the sample proclamation can look like. The resources that NCPG offers is available for anyone to use, so you can easily download it for their website. It's not copyrighted or proprietary, so feel free to make it work for you and your community as much as possible, and really work towards customizing that so it really does speak to your community and your community members. As with the grassroots effort, national resources can only go so far, and you know your resources in your community better than anyone else does. So really focus on that to make sure that those are available. And then the final piece that we'll talk about is the press release that will be available. And this is what I always call as a Swiss cheese press release, and that there's a lot of holes that you can fill in, just like Swiss cheese, and really make it your own. So you can send this press release in conjunction with NCPG. You can just insert your logo up there at the top, provide your local contact information, phone number and email, so it's easy for folks to connect with you. If you're having those conversations with media and you don't know some of the questions that they ask, you can also feel free to direct them to Kate Hubble. She is the communications director at the National Council on Problem Gambling, and she'll be happy to assist you or the media person that you're speaking with. So really looking at the press release, and everything is highlighted and super simple as possible. Just make sure that when you're going through, you do a solid proofread to make sure that no pieces are missing, because we want to make sure that the press release is as complete as possible when you're sending it out to your media folks. This also helps build those connections with your media folks. So when you work through, it helps get that face to your name, and that way when other things pop up, you're able to respond to them. So we know that we've got sports betting that is something that is being dealt with at the federal level. So that's something that some Ohio legislators have indicated that they would be interested in pursuing. So when those gambling things pop up, it's always good to have that local media contact and have them have a good sense of who you are, so you can be their first go-to person. That's always something that hopefully you're working toward, so we can have those relationships, because you are the expert, and you are the ones that can really not only combat myths, but make sure that people that things are being said in an appropriate way. And there's a big effort for person first language and not talking about quote unquote addicts. So really reinforcing that positive overall messaging that we're looking for, that so resonates and gets set before you bet. Other resources that are available through the Problem Gambling Awareness Month are graphics. As I said, the logos are easy for everyone to use, and they come in a variety of formats. So you have JPEG and PNG, so those are easy ones to just drop into your Word document. If you're working with design files that require higher resolution, the EPS and Illustrator files are also available. Or if you're just looking to drop little messages in, there's the blue ribbon and the text as well. So really wanting to make sure that the graphics are available to anyone who needs them and use them in as many ways as possible. Social media support. Looking at a grassroots campaign, we know that oftentimes you don't have a large media budget. So great ways to kind of get the message spread easily and as many different ways as possible and as inexpensively as possible is through social media outreach. And if you were like me, I hardly ever update my Facebook cover or my other social media posts, but this is a great opportunity to kind of freshen that up for the month of March, and hopefully we'll kind of get you in the habit of updating it periodically, because we know that the more updated it is, the more engaged folks will have or be in coming to your site. So There's support there for Facebook ad if you've got a small budget that you want to promote that a little bit, or if you want to look at your Facebook cover photo, Facebook posts, and then looking at other social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, or if you want to do an infographic, a blog, or even for an email header. Emails are a great way to let folks know about the work that you're doing, particularly those that work, we'll say, adjacent to gambling. So they may not be as intimately connected to working with problem gambling as you are. So that email header is a great way to kind of help folks really understand what you're working on. As I spoke about, I think we looked through all of these things through the support materials that are available, and talked about the weekly themes within those three populations, and then those audience and action points that fit within that. So those are the resources that are available from a national perspective. I want to also talk about some of the things that we'll be doing at the state perspective. And with that, I'll turn things over to Stacy to talk about some of the exciting things that are coming up that will be released within the next couple of weeks for March.
Thank you, Derek. A little handful of things. I've been working with our research division to prepare Adam Board specific Ohio Gambling Survey analysis pieces for all 50 Adam boards. So what we did for the state level data this past fall, we're now doing for each individual Adam board. Each board director will receive an email that will have these toolkit, a localized toolkit attached. In addition to the board director, if we have a problem gambling content expert in the prevention field and in the treatment field, we're also copying them in on this email. So that way the board director might have a good knowledge of problem gambling, he or she may not. But if we have someone who we consider a content expert in that board area, they'll be copied in so the board director can either pass it off to the content expert or work with them to do something in the community around the survey data and to take advantage of Problem Gambling Awareness Month as kind of a twofer, an additional hook. So new survey data is always a great hook for the media, and Awareness Month observation is another opportunity to get the media's attention. The pieces that will go out will be a 2-pager with that board-specific survey data, a PowerPoint presentation that's around 20 slides for the boards, illustrating their data. So if they want to have a community meeting, they'll have all the tools at their fingertips, already localized. A localized press release. It already has a quote in it from the local board director, but of course that quote can be changed up if the local board director wants to tailor his or her own quote. It'll have bullet points already in the press release specific to that board. So there's a few areas where we have kind of the Swiss cheese opportunity that Derek referenced in a localized press release, but for the most part, it's about ready to go. They will also have a link to the governor's proclamation, and that's already been signed, and I have a request in to get it loaded onto the MHAS website. So that'll be up within 24 or 48 hours at the most. We will be sending the 31 days of tweets that Derek quickly reviewed that is on the National Council on Problem Gambling website. We're also going to use the 31 days of tweets, or a lot of them, in the Before You Bet social media marketing effort for the month of March. And the last piece that will be part of this package that will go out this week to all the board directors is a small 12-slide PowerPoint presentation on Get Set Before You Bet. So if let's say I'm Allen County and I decide I want to have a public event to recognize Awareness Month and also let the community know what our problem gambling and responsible gambling looks like. in the Allen County area. They'll have all the tools that they could possibly need to present the data, to highlight the Before You Bet campaign and website tools, and to certainly emphasize Problem Gambling Awareness Month and the importance of having the conversation. The email will also has a brief list of ideas. So again, we're not saying that anybody has to come up with something completely on their own. They're welcome to do that. But we are offering a webinar on February 27th at 2 o'clock. February 27th at 2 o'clock. And the emails that go out will have a, sign up now for the webinar. So we'll review all of this in greater detail on that webinar. But some of those suggestions are, again, community presentations or town hall type meetings, press conference, if someone feels like doing that in their area. They could instead choose to just contact one media person, one reporter, and have a sit down with that person and just let them do a more detailed feature. It would be an exclusive to that radio station, that newspaper, or local television. And these days, it could also be a blogger in the community. A letter to the editor. There are some communities in Ohio where problem gambling numbers are actually very low. Not that many, but there are some. And that might be a good opportunity for a letter to the editor. And, what we're doing in our community works. We want to make sure people are aware of what problem gambling looks like and what the resources are to help people with gambling problems and their families. But, keep up the good work. Or a letter to the editor could go the other way. And we have a big issue in this community, and we want to make you aware of the resources because of how many people could benefit from them. And then lastly, an ongoing social media presence, using the 31 days of tweets, or just using a few of them and mixing in some of the bullets from a particular community's survey data. For example, let me open up one. I won't say where this is from because it's going to be up to the local board area if they want to go public with their data. But for example, here's a bullet. Rates of at-risk problem gambling. That one's no fun. Anyway, rates of at-risk problem gambling were approximately the same among adults, although slightly lower for 45 to 64-year-olds. That's probably not one I wouldn't have put that one in a press release. I would put something in there a little bit more jazzy. However, the data that is in the press releases is, again, tailored to that particular area. We indicated what the at-risk problem gambling rate was for a board area and also compared it to the state rate in each case. The last thing board directors will get is a sheet that shows board area by board area a specific data point. For example, levels of at-risk problem gambling, levels of kinds of employment where at-risk problem gambling is worse, basically. Education levels, race and ethnicity. So a board director can look at that and decide not to do anything with it at all, but they will have that at their fingertips for 50 board areas and how they rank on a specific data point. The rural areas tend to be different than the urban areas. Women in rural areas tend to have as much, if not more, problem gambling than the men. Just interesting data points that vary board to board. So I think that's about it. That's the resolution, as I said, will be on our website. The department will do a press release on behalf of Ohio MHAS, and we generally include the Ohio for Responsible Gambling Partners in that. And then we will also be communicating at the grassroots level with every ADAM board and content experts within that board area. That's that.
Thanks, Stacy. And this is just a reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask it in the questions section of your GoToWebinar navigation panel. We don't have any questions at this time, but of course, as questions pop up as we review this material, please just ask it there, and we will address it either at that time or when we get to our question and answer wrap up at the end of the session. So thank you again, Stacy, for providing that information and all the great work that's being done there. I know that it was a arduous process to get the 2016-17 survey conducted, and it's just fantastic to have that board-specific data that can really help create a more localized picture of what gambling and problem gambling can look like. So thank you, Stacy, for that, and all for all of your hard work there. Moving on to some of the activities that we're going to work on through PG&O and through our partners. We will have our daily Facebook posts and tweets. We already post daily for both Facebook and Twitter. So if you're not following us yet, please do so by going on Twitter at PGN Ohio and on Facebook, facebook.com/PGN Ohio. That way you can also be up to date more quickly than the weekly blast that we send out. We'll also be participating in the 31 days of tweets, and those will be in addition to the normal tweets that we have. So hopefully you'll be hearing a lot of great communication from us. We'll also be doing our March webinar will be focused on someone who's been impacted, actually a family who's been impacted by problem gambling. Brad and Jessica Martin have agreed to really go through and share their story. Brad has a gambling disorder and has been going through treatment for that for some time. He was a superintendent in the Springfield area, and his wife, Jessica, was completely unaware that there was a gambling problem in the family and was really struck by it. There was a lot of pieces that kind of worked into that that Brad and Jessica will talk about. So I really focused on March to have the family perspective, because so often we do the hard work, but it's great to be reminded about those that are able to really move past the problems that gambling has had within their lives and are able to tell their story. So I think that will be a compelling piece. Also very excited that I'm coordinating property visits and speaking with prevention and treatment professionals. Many of them say that they've never been to one of the state's casinos or racinos. So that's really a great time to ask questions of those that are working within responsible gaming on their properties, to take a tour of the property, to get a sense of what their community members are experiencing, and also to ask those questions that might be popping around in your head, but really just to never have that opportunity to talk about. So we've got some that are coordinated so far. My goal is to hit a casino and racino in kind of throughout the state. Toledo is somewhat limited in that they don't have a racino, but we'll work on setting up the casino there. So far, we've got the Hard Rock Rocksino scheduled for March 1st. We have Belterra Park, which is a racino in Cincinnati, for March 23rd in the morning, and we'll have March 23rd in the afternoon a visit to Jack Casino in Cincinnati. And then on March 29th, we've got Hollywood Gaming at the Mahoning Valley up in Youngstown at 10 a.m. I'll put out a blast when I have some more of these confirmed, so we can get those together. We'll also do a registration for that. Registration and participation in these visits are completely free, but we just need to make sure that we have names and number for the property so they can expect us and the numbers, so we're not overwhelming them. Also important to point out that if this would be a trigger situation for you or those that are within your coalition, be very mindful of that. And if that's the case, we'd ask that you not participate, because we don't want to cause harm to anyone. We just really want to make sure that the information is there and that opportunity to connect is there for those that would be interested in it. So again, all that information will be sent out as I get some more of the properties scheduled. but do really hope to have an opportunity to make those visits and create those relationships with folks within your community. As Stacy mentioned, we have the webinar on February 27th, and I say we, and I really have nothing to do with the webinar. That's being coordinated through Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and Prevention Action Alliance, so we'll talk about that. Also, on March 22nd, we have lethality and gambling disorder, why it's important to ask. One of the pieces that we work on within the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio is quality assurance calls to the Ohio Problem Gambling Helpline. And through the quality assurance calls, one of the things that we've recognized is that when it comes to talking about self-harm and lethality, there seems to be a reluctance upon the part of the specialist to ask about that. And we visited the 211 in Cleveland that coordinates the helpline and really worked through kind of their process, and the prompts are there. There's just that reluctance. So in order to address that, PG&O is partnering with Recovery Resources, and on March 22nd up in the Cleveland area, we'll have an event, and it will run from 6 to 8:30 with registration and some type of eating at 5:30, and then we'll really delve into that. And the audience for that would be really anyone that wants to know more about some of the questions to ask related to that. So it could be for clinicians. It really is pretty open. We specifically selected that time, or I should say Recovery Resources did, in speaking with the Cleveland 211. They're working throughout the day, so it's very difficult to have their staff attend during the day. So that's where an evening event was scheduled. So those are one of the pieces that is being coordinated and available to those within Ohio. And then also wanted to point out the events calendar at the PG&O website. There are a variety of conferences that are coming around, as well as other events. And we are very fortunate to have such strong partners in neighboring states that are working on problem gambling awareness. And while we will not be hosting a state conference this year, since we'll be hosting the national conference in July, every state around us has had or is coordinating a statewide conference, and we have been invited to participate in all of those. The Kentucky conference was last week, so they got it early in February, so we were able to participate in that one. But March 2nd will be in Michigan, and again, I will have all this information emailed out with registration as well. But just wanted to do a rundown, as well as the information will be on the PG&O calendar. But it'll be March 2nd in Michigan, and the cost for that is only $35. I'll be in Pittsburgh on March 8th for the Pennsylvania Western Conference, and registration cost for that is $75. And then on March 21st and March 22nd, Indiana will be hosting their annual conference, and registration for that is free. So if you're on one of our border areas and wanted to pop over to one of those other conferences, continuing education is available for all three of those, and the registration rates are really reasonable. So hopefully that will be an opportunity not only to go and enjoy the great content, but also partner and do some networking with folks that are in neighboring states, so you can learn a little bit about what they're working on. Pennsylvania, for instance, has seen a pretty broad expansion of gambling within the state, as many different ways as you can kind of imagine. So great learning opportunities there. Kentucky they've had state legislators introduce regulations or introduce bills to legalize casinos. Currently that's not legal in Kentucky. And also there's been interest related to sports gambling and daily fantasy sports. So we are much like our neighboring states and kind of processing and working with challenges and issues at the same time. So it's always great to learn from them and see what they're working on. I see we have a couple questions. Beth asks, could you send me your webinar calendar list? Beth, I will definitely do that, and we'll send it out as a follow-up to the webinar. And I will do that with the property schedule as well. So thank you, Beth, for those questions. Again, if you have questions, please ask it in the question section of your GoToWebinar navigation panel. And with that, I will turn things over to Ashley to talk about some of the local things that they're working on up in Cleveland.
Hi, everyone. So I'm really excited to share some things we have going on with all of you. So the first week of March, we will be tabling at all 3 of the Recovery Resources locations. And with that, we'll have literature for clients about problem gambling. Then we're going to have some staff in-service kind of lunch and learns with departments within Recovery Resources. And this is just for those departments who may not have the best understanding of what we do. So we're just trying to get everyone on the same page here. And then we will be sending a newsletter, email blast, and that we'll be sending that out soon to all of our contacts. And in there, it will contain information like what can you do, events, some of the online screens, and as well as webinars. We will have a big literature distribution. So what that is our coalition members have volunteered to hand out materials such as the Get Set Before You Bet literature, some of our Recovery Resources problem gambling material, as well as NCPG material. And they will drop those off with places like campuses, college campuses, senior centers, and as well as like churches. And then we are really excited about a community event with the Advisory Council. It's a little bit late. It's April 4th or April 5th, I'm sorry, but that's just how it worked out. And what this is, it's at Grace Church in Middleburg Heights. And, the council will just tell kind of their personal stories. And we're just really excited about that. And that's kind of all we have going on right now. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ashley. And this is your opportunity you as attendees opportunity to talk about some of the activities that you're planning. So when we're looking at some of the things that you're working on, what activities are you planning to do? So this is your audience participation chime. So you can either type those things into the question section, and I'll go through them there. So just really talking about what you're planning to do. And while you're typing those pieces in, I also wanted to give a little bit of food for thought for some other things and ways to engage different audiences. So if you're talking about students, we've got the new gambling survey data, but that is for adults. We don't have statewide data related to students. So as you're looking at the drug use surveys that you might be conducting in your schools or behavioral health surveys that are going on, really checking in to make sure that there are survey questions specific to gambling. Also, when you're thinking about schools, many of the boosters have 50-50 raffles. And what kind of policies are in place to ensure that those raffles are only going to be available to adults? And if an adult was having a problem, are there trainings or are there signs to kind of help with those boosters in recognizing that? So great ways to kind of interact with that. Also with schools, what kind of policies do the schools have related to gambling? And not only identifying gambling that's occurring within the school, but if one of their students would indicate a gambling problem, how are they going to address that? So great conversations to talk about there. As we look with older adults, and we can look at those that are in kind of either assisted living or care facilities. I know gambling oftentimes is the go-to place for that. And if you are going to talk to one of the facilities about gambling, they're going to oftentimes be reluctant to have that conversation with you. So a workaround and kind of an approach to that might be not necessarily addressing for the older adult themselves, but could also be having concern with those that manage the older adult's funds, because the individual that manages those funds could also have an issue with gambling, and some of those funds could get diverted. So it's a great opportunity to have the conversation with those that are working with older adults, as well as older adults and other caregivers, to really talk about kind of the impacting that gambling might have, as well as some signs and and tips to look out for to make sure that everyone is being safe, not just physically, but also fiscally safe. Also, employers and colleagues. How many of your employers have policies related to gambling? And even within our field, oftentimes, when you go through your employee handbook, it's something that is either not well defined or something that is completely skipped. So it's a great time to have that conversation with your employers to review that employee handbook and make sure that there are appropriate pieces in place for that. Also a great time to reprompt everyone to review that employee handbook. Because if you're like me, you start a new job, you get your employee handbook, you read through it, put it in your filing cabinet, and then you never look at it again. Well, all that information that you read on that first day at the job, most of that probably got lost along the way. So really important to have those reminders come through about what those policies are and to ensure that everyone's operating within those policies. Also a great time to have the conversation with your colleagues. In talking with prevention and treatment professionals before the casinos and racinos opened, it was really informative to see how low community readiness was within our field related to addressing gambling, let alone the broader community. So really talking about gambling with your colleagues and having a little bit of conversation about that. And also, as you look to both the employees and the colleagues, looking at raffles that might be taking place with March Madness. If you want to complete brackets, look at your organizational policies, and if as a team building exercise, you all want to do that, that's something that you could do, but not having money associated with that. So you can still have the team building and bonding exercise, but not have it associated with money, but just have it more fun focused. Also looking at grocery store carryouts. What kind of reviews do those that work at the grocery stores or carryouts do related to making sure that no one underage is purchasing lottery tickets, whether it be in person or at the kiosks. So having those conversations with those folks to see what their policies and practices are to ensure that they're being in compliance with state laws and that lottery tickets aren't being sold to young people. So with that, I see no one has any additional pieces for what they plan to do. So hopefully we've done a great job at really encompassing all the pieces that are going on within Problem Gambling Awareness Month and the resources that are available at the state and national levels and some of that local implementation. So with that, I will open it up to any final questions and wrap things up. As you ask your final questions, just as a reminder, I wanted to let you know that CEUs will be sent out on Thursday, along with the handouts from today, the link to the recording, and also those additional pieces that we talked about related to the property visits and the state conference. And also wanted to make sure that you were going to sign up for the March webinar to learn about the pieces that are going on with Problem Gambling Awareness Month through the lens of those that are being impacted by it with Jessica and Brad Martin. And I see that we have one question coming in, and this question is for Stacy. Stacy, if a board doesn't want to share their local data, is there anything that the provider can do to, well, it said do, but anything that you recommend that they can do to kind of help them share their data?
That's a very good question, and I think the provider should talk to the board, probably that board director, about the opportunity to build awareness of problem gambling with some of the data that they'd like to share. That doesn't mean that the community needs to be flooded with every last detail, but being able to have some awareness of what problem gambling means and what the resources for help are and what responsible gambling looks like. In my mind, it's an opportunity that shouldn't be passed up. So it doesn't have to be a town hall meeting, and I don't really anticipate more than a handful or, a dozen or less, a dozen or fewer communities going to that extreme. But to take the opportunity to at least sit down with a reporter or have a phone interview in order to build some awareness in your community. If I were with an agency in the community, I would definitely talk to our local board about that and offer your services. We know that you don't have time for this. We have a lot of board areas that are completely inundated with the opiate crisis. But we do have, for example, say, 11.5% of our citizens, of our adult citizens with at-risk problem gambling. And we'd like to be able to put something out so that they have a better awareness of what the resources are. So I would make it an opportunity for free promotion, free public health messaging, and offer your help to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the only questions that we have. So we reviewed a pretty big amount of information. That is a terrible way to say that, but we reviewed a lot. And hopefully you'll take a moment to go to PG&O's website as well as NCPG's website to review some of those pieces related to the PGAM resources and the events that are coming up. And hopefully that will also prompt some additional questions to me. And I love hearing from you, so please reach out to me either by phone at 614-750-9899 or dlongmire@pgnohio.org. Also, thank you to Stacy and Ashley for their input in today's webinar. And it's always great to have such resources and such partners within the state to kind of help with this work. Because we know that we can't do it alone and really need the participation of everyone to make that impact that we're looking for. So thank you again for all of your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.